All right, here we go. I am really into podcasting now. I didn't used to be. In fact, my good friend, the amazing Cindy Doyle, asked me a really good question when I was kind of toying with the idea of a podcast. She was like, why? So why? Why do you want to do that, Kate? Why do you want to add this to the stuff you already do? And it was a great question, because with podcasting comes a whole slew of other things. And just a reminder, if you are joining me live, you don't have to have your camera on or anything. This is it's all being recorded, and I'll not unmute. I will stop the recording 5 minutes before the end so that you can ask questions. So podcasting is sort of like, if you go back and you look at the training that I did about blogs, you're going to find that a lot of those don'ts apply to this as well. So by the end of this training today, you're going to know how I feel about the don'ts, like reasons not to podcast, but you're also going to have some great tools if you are just determined that podcasting is something you want to do. And I'll even give you a good reason why you should do it. So I know that sounds kind of topsy-turvy, but let's get to work. Let's see, make sure I get my water. All right. So when I talk to you about blogging, one of the things I mentioned to you is navel gazing. So this idea that you're going to blog about the things that sort of interest you, and you're looking out in the backyard and you're going to be like, oh, this is my thing and my heart. And you kind of like a poet, right? Well, I said, don't do that, right? And I told you why, because you don't know what people are searching for. Do they really want to know all of your thoughts? I don't know, but we can find out. So with podcasting, you're going to get the same message. It's such a sort of arduous tool. It's it's kind of hard to do. There are some technical elements, and I'll talk about those in a minute too with podcasting. And it takes up a lot of time. So if you're doing this and just hoping that you're going to get discovered, kind of like, rock stars back in the 80s, and they just kind of hope somebody was going to walk by their garage and say, you know what, you're the band and we're going to record you and give you a big contract and all that. Yeah, you gotta get rid of that. In fact, it's funny. My husband and I are binging this show called Murders in the Building. And it's hilarious. And it's got Martin Short and Steve Martin. Who's the other girl? She used to be a Disney kid. But anyway, Selena Gomez. It's so cool because they do this podcast, and like immediately, at least within like 10 episodes, they're viral. And we all want to be that. We all want to have this audience that follows us on a podcast. I mean, otherwise we wouldn't do it. So the first thing I'm going to tell you as far as the don't is don't navel gaze. Don't make this just something that is sort of a passion project, unless you've got a ton of time. If you have a ton of time and this is just, you don't want to take up knitting or crocheting or something like that, yeah, then absolutely do podcasting. Also, don't expect podcasting to help Google find you. Podcasts and Google they're not married yet. And here's why. Podcasting is a lot like recording music. You've heard of things like SoundCloud or Bandcamp, perhaps. And so what podcasting does is you upload it to something called a distributor. And the distributor is independent. I mean, you could start a distributor company if you like. It's kind of like a publishing company. And the distributor shoots it out to all of the iHeartRadios and the Spotifys and the Apples and all of that. So it's not going to help anybody find you because it doesn't play with Google yet. So there's no SEO optimization. There aren't really any keywords and tags and all of those things. We don't do that with podcasts. Now you can still go to Google and say, what are people searching for? And Google will tell you, and that can help you design your podcast topics, but it's not going to help people find your website based on rankings in Google. And we talk about that so much in Step It Up and Texas Counselors Creating Badass Businesses, SEO, to help your website appear on that first page for the topics that you specialize in. Finally, so don't base it on what, let me make sure I'm not saying this twice. So do base your podcasts on what others are searching for, because they're hard. And one of the reasons podcasting is harder, I think, than even video is because the sound quality has to be pretty pristine. And I don't know if I've got a good example for you, but if you can imagine watching a YouTube video, maybe with kind of subpar sound quality. Well, if they've done a really good job at the video and the editing, and they've got words on the screen, so there's some subtitles, and they have great, maybe a PowerPoint, or they've done some great editing to explain what they're saying. And so, for example, I know when I'm looking for an answer to something in my editing software, I go to YouTube and I type in, hey, I've got a problem. And I might see 4 or 5 YouTube videos from folks where English is a second language, and they maybe are struggling to, really talk through the topic, but they have done such an amazing job on the editing. I can see exactly what they're talking about. So the editing and the images make up for the fact that the sound quality is less than optimal. Or maybe they're speaking with an accent and it's hard for me to understand. So I've got my eyes and ears kind of working together, right? With podcasting, it's not like that. So this, right? If you get on your treadmill and you've got your earbuds in and you're listening to a podcast and it's like, that's annoying, isn't it? Right? If that was going on through the entire podcast, oh my gosh, I know personally I couldn't take it, right? Or maybe it sounded like this the whole time, right? And the person's talking, but you're hearing. So again, with podcasting, you have to remember this person has only one input. So your editing and the sound quality has to be pretty darn good. And there are some other tricks to that as well. I know some people do the long form podcasts, but podcasts generally are going to take about as much time as somebody would spend in the gym, or as long as they would spend in the car while they're waiting for their kids to finish with baseball practice or something like that. So since Google and podcasts don't necessarily play nice yet, the SEO optimization benefit isn't there. But I am going to show you how I use podcasts and blogs as together so that it does help Google find me. The other piece is consistency. If you're not consistent with a podcast, people just keep moving. Right? I mean, if you decide you're going to drop a podcast every Friday, let's say, and then life happens, you haven't put out a podcast in a month, well, you may have lost your audience, right? Because they found another podcast similar to you, and they're not going to quit that one if it's consistent and giving them the answers that they need. So it's very competitive to have a podcast. So with all of that, I like to start off with the bad news first, right? Because I'm going to give you good news here. Why should you start a podcast? Well, number one, this helps people get to know you. We've talked about that before with video. It helps potential clients form that emotional connection with you. They find out what you're all about. They hear your opinions, your research on lots of different topics, and they follow you. And so these folks, if they hear that, okay, there's an opportunity here for me to become a client of this person, or there's a way I can refer this person, that's you, to my family, friend, colleague for this issue, that's amazing, right? And so with the distribution, it's a little bit different because you don't know exactly how your podcast text, because there's usually a place where you can write a description of your podcast. You don't know how that's going to appear on Spotify or Amazon or iHeartRadio and all of those different things. But you can put links in there to other things you've done. So there is a way to pull in other content that you've created by using the descriptors and the verbiage in your description, in your distribution. And again, I will show you, I'm going to screen share in just a little bit so you can ask me questions. If you're listening to this, if you're watching it on a replay, if you're not able to interact with the stuff I show on the screen, don't you worry. I will totally describe it to you so you know what's going on. So we start with what people want. We narrow that search. And if you really want to get down to a podcast topic, you want to survey your competition. So for example, if you wanted to do podcasting, a podcast series over intake sessions for play therapy for kids 6 and under, well, that's pretty narrow. So you might want to go to the podcast arena and type in, okay, I'm looking for play therapy. Now remember, they don't do SEO and search and tags the way you're used to in Google, but you can still do a search in, let's say, Apple Podcasts. And so you can find other podcasts doing the same thing, and you can get an idea of what their angle is. A lot of folks now, they interview experts, and that is sort of a huge part of their podcasting. Other folks treat it more kind of like I do. They do a training and then they record it. So see what other people are doing in the genre that you're trying to get into. Number 2, as always, take time to learn your craft and get help. So if you're going to do this, again, I'm going to show you in a second how I use it and how it can help your website in the search engines. Get help. So I have a couple of different kinds of software for editing. I have something I use called PreSonus. I use that more for music editing. I have something else called Camtasia, and I'll be sure to put those links in our show notes and in the training and Step It Up so that you can see these things. And Camtasia is actually a little bit easier for me because I can take my audio, like I'm creating right now, 2 things, right? I'm creating a video and I'm creating audio. And Camtasia is a little bit easier for me to split those in 2 so I can repurpose. So you guys know I love to repurpose things. So I could take this and turn it into a little training like I will for Step It Up. Then I may turn it into a podcast episode. Then I may put it on my YouTube channel. Camtasia also has something called Audiate. Audiate plays nicely with Camtasia. In fact, it's sort of an app that works with Camtasia. And it's super cool because let's say you are going to write a script for your podcast. I do my stuff unscripted. I just write a bunch of notes down and then I go for it. But if you wanted to write a script for your podcast, Audiate would let you do it sort of like in 2 takes. So you would speak through your podcast. Maybe it's really rough. Maybe you like it. Maybe you don't like it. But Audiate would create a transcript. And you could use that as your script then to go back in, re-record the podcast, and really polish it up. So Audiate, Camtasia, PreSonus, those are all good editing software as you learn the craft. Now, I use an editor. I actually send my stuff out to an editor, and I get my editor through Upwork. And you guys have heard me talk about Upwork before. It's a place where you can get contract workers help and all kinds of different things. You know that I have my wonderful transcriptionist that I use there. My amazing podcast editor who will hear this, Carl, you are amazing and you do a fabulous job for me. That's all through Upwork. So I tried doing it by myself for a while, and it was good because I was able to learn the craft and understand what I like and what I don't like. And I can actually give Carl some halfway intelligent feedback when he sends me the first draft. You know, I can let him know what I like and what I don't like. But if you really are just starting this, I highly recommend just going through the hard work at first and really learning the craft and understanding what it's about. So the other piece is then I've talked about Buzzsprout, Camtasia, Audiate, an editorial calendar. Now, I'm not going to get into that in this training because I've talked about this before too. So I promise you I will put a link. You'll see it in the show notes because I did a blog about, and a podcast and a YouTube video, I think, about an editorial calendar, creating a calendar that predicts and helps you create content on a schedule. So that may mean the month of June is all about this. The month of July is all about that. You pre-plan these podcast episodes, and then you can do something called batch them, right? You can do this with videos as well. That means you may sit down and do 6 in one day, 6 podcast episodes, get them done. And the next thing you know, it's July and you are finished through October. So that staying organized piece is a huge part of creating content, whether it's a podcast or video or blog or anything like that. So please take a second. If you haven't looked at that in a while, I'm going to post the link so you can go check that out and understand how creating an editorial calendar is a game changer if you're going to try to use this. Now, why get a podcast? Why do this in the first place? There is a way to use your podcast with your blog so that it does create and kind of supercharge your search engine optimization, the ability for Google to find you and crawl you. So this is where I am going to go to screen share. So if you're listening to this, don't despair. I promise I'm going to talk you through it. Here I go. Says it's loading. All right. So what you're looking at right now, I'm going to click and just let's start over. I'm going to go to my homepage. So this is the homepage, and this is the Kate Walker Training website. So just imagine your website here for your practice. If you click on podcast, you'll see all of the podcasts that I've created in the past few months. And so what I'm going to do, let's just click on the one we uploaded last week, Texas Counselor Best Practices. Now, some of you may be going, wait a second, this doesn't look like a podcast. Good job, it doesn't. Because, surprise, surprise, it's actually a blog. This is my blog. So what do we know about blogs? Go back and listen to the episode about blogs, because what we can do with blogs is keyword optimize the heck out of them, tag and do all the things so that Google loves them, finds them, wants to show them to all the people searching for that topic. So what we've done is we've created a blog that Google loves and embedded a podcast episode, which we know Google doesn't love. But hey, if it comes with the blog, Google's like, oh my gosh, points for you. You've got so much good information here for Sally user over here, because she is looking for information about best practices on social media in Texas for Texas counselors. And we're going to show her this blog because you have so much great information. Now, that's how a podcast can start to really help you get found by Google. So for potential clients, if you've got the blog and you embed the podcast, now you've got your potential client going, okay, this looks like a really good article. Yeah, don't have time to read it, gotta go. But I can get on Spotify and I can find this, put it in my earbuds, and listen to it while I'm waiting for Susie to get out of volleyball practice. So this is hitting your potential client, your potential referrer, right? That person in the community that is referring you to family and friends. It's helping them find you in multiple ways. Best of all, though, at least for me, this is best of all, you can combine this, combining the podcast with Google. is just, it's like a dynamo. You're helping your Google, right? You're helping your podcast and Google work together when normally they would not. So I'm showing you right now, again, you're looking at the blog. You're seeing in the middle of the page of my blog, there is the podcast. If I click play, there, if you click play, there's my voice. And then if you scroll down, it looks like every other blog. So let me take you now to the back office and what this looks like. I use WordPress, but I know you can do this with other website hosts, I'm sure. So if I click edit post, waiting, here we are. So now we see we've got our blog. This little tiny thing over here is what an embed looks like. When you embed your podcast, it just shows up looking like that little tiny square. And you can see that SEO over here, we've got a green check mark, and in Yoast, that's a good thing. Same thing with readability. So we've got a very well optimized blog. We got lots of tags, lots of keywords, and we've got the podcast right here in the middle. So I'm going to switch over now to my distributor because I promised I would. This is Buzzsprout, and I'll post a link to that as well. I don't have affiliates with any of these folks, so just know that if you go, well, Kate, if you can't do it if you're typing on your Mac, huh? Let me try that again. There we go. So this is what a distributor looks like. So Buzzsprout, all of the episodes are here, and it will tell me how many downloads I have. And then if I want to go to stats, it will show me how it, this is also going to help me with my marketing efforts. I can find out which marketing efforts are helping me sell or not sell. I don't sell podcasts. It helps me with my distribution. But this is what's really cool down here. It helps me know where my podcast is being distributed. So if you're listening to this, what I'm showing everyone, Apple Podcasts, we've got the Buzzsprout embed player, which is what I have on my website embedded into my blogs, unknown Apple apps, Spotify. And if I click more apps, you can see that we've got different devices. See all apps. There we go. Amazon Echo, Podbean, Google Podcasts, not getting a whole lot of distribution there, but that is what it is. Oh, all episodes. Let me click that. So when I click all episodes, we see I get a little bit of distribution, but by and large, my podcast is appearing on Apple Podcasts more than anything else. So to wrap up, let me just kind of, I gave you the same don'ts as I gave you with blogs, right? Make sure if you're going to take on the work of creating a podcast that you sit down and write down the why. Why are you doing this? Because if it's SEO optimization, it's not going to do that, right? Unless you have a blog already. So if you know that this is something you want to do to help you connect with potential clients and people in the community who can refer you, awesome. If you know that this is going to fill a gap, perhaps in education, and you just want to make sure that your voice is part of that conversation, absolutely. If you just want to make sure that, you have a hobby. I know a lot of people that do podcasting for fun. And it is fun. I do like doing it, but I'm going to go back to it's a lot of work. And I know my folks in Step It Up and the folks in Texas Counselors Creating Badass Businesses. I know starting a podcast in addition to counseling and starting a private practice, it's a lot. And my message to you guys is you're too important to lose to being overwhelmed and burned out. So if you're going to add podcasting, maybe make this something you do in your mastermind group, something that takes you over the next 4 months to really sit down and dissect and, ask questions and say, wait a second, Kate, go into that back office again. I want to see how you did that, right? Really sit down and learn the ins and outs so that when you do it, when you decide to do it, you're ready to go and it will be amazing. So I'm going to hit the pause button. Let me try that again. I'm going to hit the pause button here. I'm Dr. Kate Walker. Thank you so much for watching the Step It Up training. And please hang out if you want to ask questions. I'm also going to still be on the Facebook Live, so you guys can type questions in as well. But I'm going to hit pause. Here I go.